welcome back to my YouTube channel, and you are watching The Nerdy Grail. Now, got a bit of a different video for you here today. It's actually going to be a prediction video. But what we're going to be predicting, well, it's a new topic for today's video. We are looking at the franchise of Pokemon. Now, Pokemon is one of the biggest franchises out there, and since 1996 it has been releasing a flock of popular video games, from Game Boy to on the GameCube with spin-offs. We've got on the DS, the 3DS, the Nintendo Switch. The list is endless. The Wii, the Wii U. Pokemon has dominated the gaming market, and it's very hard to find people who don't know Pokemon, or at least the mascot Pokemon of Pikachu. And every year we tend to get a mainline Pokemon game, whether that is the next generation, or whether that is a remake of a previous generation, or even something a bit different or new that is sort of sandwiched between a remake and a brand new game, a bit like Pokemon Legends Arceus, which came out a couple of years ago. And this year, unfortunately, though, we've not actually had a proper mainline Pokemon game. Last year, obviously, we had the DLCs, like the Indigo Disc for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but this year we've not had anything. However, we have had announcements, and that we know that next year, in 2025, Nintendo, Game Freak, the Pokemon Company, did put out a teaser trailer for a new Pokemon game titled Pokemon Legends ZA. Now, that sounds really fascinating, and it gives me vibes of, obviously, Legends Arceus, so it might be another Pokemon game within that style. And we finally get to revisit Kalos again. I loved Gen 6, and I loved the concept of Mega Evolution, so I'm so happy that that seems to be coming back again, because I was gutted when that was starting to get taken out. However, one of the questions that remains with any Pokemon game, really, is what will the starter Pokemon be? That's like the core choice in any Pokemon game. Which starter Pokemon are you going to pick? This is my plush of Trico. We've got a little Mudkip here. And obviously, to complete the Hoenn lineup, you've got to have a Torchic. The Hoenn, by the way, starters are my favourite trio of starters. I adore the Hoenn starters, Mudkip being my favourite. But we need to know, which starters are we going to be able to pick when playing through Pokemon Legends ZA? Well, that's what I'm going to be doing in today's video. I'm going to be giving you my predictions for what I think the free starter Pokemon are going to be. Now, obviously, this is not concrete. This is just my predictions based on previous games and knowledge that I've seen via YouTube, because there's been some great videos about predicting the starters that I have seen. I will be doing it in a tier list format. So, join me for the tier list at predicting the starter Pokemon for Pokemon Legends ZA. These are my starter predictions. So the categories we've got is extremely unlikely, so those are the starters that I think are definitely not going to be chosen. Unlikely, meaning there's a slight possibility, but I very, very much doubt it. Likely, meaning there's about a 50-50 chance. More than likely means that they're definitely on the cards for potential starters. And then at the top here, I'm going to put the free starters that I personally think will be selected as the starters. So I'm not going to do these in any particular order. I'm just going to pick them out at random. And how I've judged this is based on previous games, well, from watching other videos, and who I think would best suit this particular generation. So straight away, I'm going to knock off the bat. I'm going to put Cyndaquil. I'm going to put Oshawott, and I am going to put, who was the other option? Who was it? And Rowlet into the extremely unlikely category. Now, the reasons I've put these three as the extremely unlikely options is because they were the literal starters in Pokemon Legends Arceus. And so I don't think that they would choose them again, because it would be a bit boring, a bit predictable, and it wouldn't make the games as entertaining if you were to use the same starters that you literally used in the previous Legends game. Nothing against these starters. I love all three of these starters. They are probably my favourite starters from their respective generation. However, I think it's very unlikely we're going to see these three as the potential starter in Pokemon Legends ZA. I'm also not going to consider the option of 2 starters, because obviously in X and Y, you got to have a Kalos starter and a Catonian starter. But for this video, I'm just going to be focusing on what the first starter would be. So, those 3 are definitely extremely unlikely in my opinion. What I'm also going to say is I'm going to then put, let's see, I'm going to then go with, I'm going to put Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle in the unlikely category. Now, I know what people are probably thinking. Hello, they were a starter choice in Pokemon X and Y, so why would they be in the unlikely? Look, they were a secondary choice. You had them later in the game. Well, not later in the game, got them quite early on, but they weren't your initial starter. So I think, if anything, they could be in the game, but they won't be part of the original trio. I don't think, personally. I think they could be in the wild, which is what I think will happen, because in Legends Arceus, you could catch the Sinnoh starters in the wild. So I think, like that, you could probably get the Kanto starters in the wild to match that of the Sinnoh starters, who were, obviously, they're the Sinnoh starters, but they weren't, none of them were the choices for Legends Arceus. I think the same could be true for the Kanto starters. So Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, I think they will be probably catchable in the wild, but I don't think they will be part of the original trio that you will get. That's just my personal opinion. Then we have got the latest starters of Sprigatito, Fuecoco, and Quaxley. Now, personally, I'm also going to put them in the unlikely category. I would say they're definitely not an extremely unlikely, but I think they are unlikely, simply due to the fact that, obviously, we've had Scarlet and Violet, so they were the starters in Scarlet and Violet. And so I feel like, again, similar to Pokemon Legends Arceus, they probably would like to give them a bit of a break in terms of their usability. Doesn't mean that they won't be catchable in the wild, which is why they're in unlikely. They might pop up, but personally, I don't think they will. And if we're going based on the theme of Legends Arceus, thinking about the Pokédex in Legends Arceus, they tended to mostly just stick to the Sinnoh Dex. And so it would be unlikely that you would get these 3 in it. Because if we're thinking it would be mostly the Kalos Pokédex, with then a couple of extras thrown in, a bit like Legends Arceus, where you had Hisuian forms of Lilligant and stuff like that. And Ursaring, you had Ursaluna, so it's possible, and Weirdeer. So it's possible, but I think personally they're going to be unlikely. Then next, I would probably say we're starting to get into the starters now that could be possibly likely. So I'm going to go now in terms, I'm going to personally say I think Snivy is a decent shout for a starter. Tepig, I'm going to say, is likely. I have heard some speculations online that Snivy is a likely candidate if they were to go down the Gen 5 route. Personally, for me, I think they might end up staying away from Gen 5 as well. Simply because, obviously, Oshawott was part of the Legends Arceus line. And they might want to do some different generations. But I'm going to put Tepig down in likely, and I'm going to move Snivy to likely. So Tepig unlikely, Snivy's likely, and vice versa. I'm going to say with Chikorita, I think Chikorita is a likely candidate, as well as Totodile. And then also I would say Litten and Poplio would also be likely, but not above that. So there's like a 50-50 chance, because these are all the remaining Johto, Unova, and Alola starters that haven't been picked. The reason I can't put them any higher is because I think any starter from these trios they might want to stay away from, just so that they can give other trios a chance. And so then that leaves us then with Hoenn, Sinnoh, Kalos, and Gala starters. And all these, I think, would definitely be in likely and above. I would possibly say I'm going to go for one who I think is personally going to be a choice. I'm going to put Torchic up into, personally think these are the choices. The reason I say Torchic as the fire type starter out of all of them, even more so than Fennekin, is because of the Mega Evolution and being different. I've heard heavy rumours about a Gen 3 starter could be one of the starters. It makes sense to have Torchic, as Torchic is an animal that is the national emblem as well and is highly represented in France, but also the fact that it was the only one of the Hoenn starters at the time to get a Mega Evolution, so there was special treatment given to Torchic, and so I think they'll carry that special treatment on into Legend Z8 as well. Speaking of the Kalos starters, I'm going to put them in likely, but they're not going to go any higher, because I think, a bit like the Sinnoh starters in Legends Arceus, you're likely to get them in the game. They will probably, a bit like the Kanto starters, they will probably be wild encounters, and you can find them in the wild. Because you can find Turtwig, Chimchar, and Piplup in the wild in Legends Arceus. So I think you'll be able to find Chespin, Fennekin, and Froakie in the wild in Legends ZA. But I don't think they'll use them as the starters, because that would be too obvious and too generic, and they'd want to change it up a little bit. So who does that leave us with now? Well, we've got 2 starters left from Hoenn, the whole Sinnoh trio, and the Gala trio. Now, I think, personally, if we're trying to be different, I'm going to say Piplup is going to be the potential water starter in Pokemon Legends ZA. It's just a hunch from me personally, and I think, I don't know why, but I feel like it makes sense, especially with Empoleon as well. I don't know, it seems right. It seems very... It's very regal. The crown piece on Empoleon's head as well. It sort of suits the theme, and so I think Empoleon, with that strong steel typing, would make sense to have as a starter in Legend ZA. Especially since now we've got a Hoenn starter, we can't then also have Mudkip as the water starter for Legend ZA. However, I will say, I think that we'll go with Mudkip and Trico next. I think that, personally, Trico and Mudkip are also quite likely to be starters in the game as well. Hoenn starter would be really good for the game, but I would love it to be Mudkip. Mudkip's my favourite starter of all time, but I personally think water would better suit Piplup, and Piplup would better suit the region. But you never know, because obviously Swampert, it can live in the sewers, you know, live underneath Lumio City. It could make sense. You could make sense for it, but I think Piplup is the water one. Then, as for the remaining Sinnoh starters and the Gala starters, I would personally say, I think it is quite... We could get a Scorbunny. I think a Scorbunny as a potential starter, it could be quite strong and would be a very interesting idea, to say the least. And I'd be quite happy with that. Because I really do like Cinderace. I would also say Trico is quite... not Trico. Turtwig is quite likely as a potential starter. But I don't think they would go that route. And also, we've already got Piplup. But actually, no, I'd probably put Turtwig... I'd probably put Turtwig up here, personally. I feel like they'd give him some love. I think Grookey is probably going to be our grass starter for Legends EA. You know, it swings and roundabouts, really. I was tossing and turning between these three in particular, Snivy, Turtwig, and Grookey. But the reason I didn't put Snivy instead of Grookey is just because I think they're going to stay away from using any of these trios. Just for variety, personally. And then I would say probably Chimchar and Sobble are probably quite likely as well. You know, that is probably what I would say the list would be for me personally. And I would be very happy if these were the three starters. I adore Torchic, and I love the Hoenn starters. I adore Piplup. Piplup's my favourite Sinnoh starter. And Grookey was my first choice starter when I played Sword and Shield. So I would be more than happy to use a Grookey. But there is loads of other starters that are possibilities. I think Snivy could be a possibility, but I just think with the Unova link, it might not happen. I also wouldn't be surprised if we saw any of these other Hoenn starters, so Trico or Mudkip. Trico or Mudkip could easily creep up into more than likely or personal choice, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw those. And hey, it could shock us, and they could end up using one of the Kanto starters as the starter, just so they don't have two starters then. But I think this is probably the way it's going to go. Obviously, this is just a prediction, so it's highly likely that I'm wrong. However, I will be happy if I get even a single one of these choices correct. If I was to put a guess as to which I think out of these three is the most likely, I think Piplup is probably the one out of these three most likely to be in the game, if I was to put my money on it. But that is going to be my prediction for the Legends ZA starters. So, who do you think is going to be the starter Pokemon in Legends EA? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you are new, because I do a large variety of content and there's bound to be something on this channel that you will like. So, this is going to be the Nerdy Grail signing off for now. I will see you all in the next video. Take care and bye-bye for now, everybody.